the 430-foot body break. You put your faith in engineering, in rules, and in the idea that the people running these massive rides know what they're doing. For 14-year-old Tyre Sampson, that faith was tragically misplaced on the Orlando Freefall ride. This wasn't some old rickety carnival attraction. It was the world's tallest freestanding drop tower, 430 feet of steel, a marvel of modern engineering that had only been open for 3 months. The entire system's survival came down to one detail. The gap between the passenger and the restraint had to be less than 3 1/3 inches, a rule set by the manufacturer for a very good reason. Tyre was a 14-year-old honor student from St. Louis, standing 6 feet 2 inches and weighing 383 pounds, a big kid with dreams of playing in the NFL. He was on spring break in Orlando with his friend's family when they visited Icon Park. He was nearly 100 pounds over the weight limit and had already been refused entry on 2 different occasions because of his size, but instead of turning him away, the operators faced a choice and chose profit over human life. Someone took tools and manually adjusted the proximity sensors on 2 seats, deliberately loosening them so the restraint would open wider, bypassing the built-in safeguards. Forensic investigators later uncovered the sabotage, evidence that would eventually lead to a $310 million settlement for Tyre's family. The safe gap was supposed to be 3 inches. They changed it to nearly 7. So when the tower plunged and the magnetic brakes engaged about 200 feet up, the sheer force of the drop expanded the gap to 10 inches. Tyre Sampson slipped free and dropped over 200 feet, hitting the ground with a ruthless, body-shattering impact. The ugly truth is that nothing malfunctioned and every mechanical part worked exactly as designed. The only thing that failed was human integrity, and a young boy paid the ultimate price for that greed. The skull smash impact. We often think of roller coaster dangers as high-speed derailments or failed lap bars, but sometimes the horror is much simpler and, in a way, more frightening. Here's how a simple track switch became an instrument of death for 23-year-old James Frederick Pauley. The year was 1980, the ride was Fire in the Hole at Silver Dollar City, Missouri, and the cause was a fatal miscommunication. Now, Fire in the Hole wasn't your typical towering coaster. It was a dark, indoor attraction that told a story, and its mechanics included a simple track switch that would send empty trains off to a maintenance area. The operators, believing James's train was empty, threw the switch. They redirected his car with him sitting right there in the front, off the main passenger circuit, and directly onto the maintenance track. This maintenance area was never meant for people. It was a narrow tunnel with low-hanging iron supports and structures just barely clearing the empty trains that usually passed through. As James's train carried him into this confined space, maintenance workers who saw it happening began screaming in horror, yelling at the top of their lungs for the passengers to duck. The woman riding with James heard them and threw herself down, saving her own life. But James, either not hearing the warnings or not reacting in time, remained seated, his head smashed into an overhead beam at full speed. The blow was catastrophic, splitting his head wide open and spraying blood and bone as everything ended in that moment. Silver Dollar City would call it a horrific case of human error, and they reopened the ride just 2 days later after removing the deadly overhangs. But for James Pauley, that single 3-second mistake was a switch that could never be flipped back. The body-splitting fall. You know what's worse than a roller coaster malfunction? When the safety systems work exactly as designed and someone still ends up dead. That's what happened to Rosa Esparza at Six Flags Over Texas in July 2013. She was 52, visiting the park for the first time in her life, excited to ride the Texas Giant with her family. The coaster was known for its 14-story height and a first drop that was nearly vertical. She buckled into the 3rd row, the bar clicked into place, and the train began its slow, clinking climb up that enormous lift hill. But what happened next was a tragic mix of small failures that came together. Witnesses said they heard a loud pop as the train tipped into that steep drop. Her restraint wasn't secured tightly enough, and that's when it gave out. Rosa was sent flying a staggering 75 feet down, higher than most 7-story buildings on your block. On her way down, she slammed into a steel support beam with such brutal force that her torso tore in two. Her fall ended when she hit the metal roof of the honky-tonk tunnel below. The autopsy later confirmed her cause of death was multiple traumatic injuries from the fall. Now here's a detail that just adds another layer of tragedy to this whole thing. An employee admitted later that Rosa's restraint felt loose, higher than it should have been, but the panel showed all green lights, so they sent it anyway. Even worse, this issue had come up just days earlier. but the ride was still allowed to run. So you have a known issue, a warning ignored by a computer light, and a woman who paid the ultimate price for that complacency. The Texas Giant shut down and came back with new protection gear like seatbelts and test seats for riders to check their fit beforehand. But for Rosa Esparza, and for everyone who witnessed that devastating plunge, it forever changed what it means to feel safe. The flesh-grinding ride. It's a truly chilling thought that a day dedicated to celebrating children could become the backdrop for one of the most gruesome roller coaster accidents in history, all because of a reckless decision made years ago. Sadly, for 19-year-old Yoshino Kogawara, Children's Day at Osaka's Expoland in 2007 became the last day of her life. Yoshino was riding the Fujin Raijin 2, a stand-up coaster that had been operating since 1992, but what she couldn't possibly know was that the very axle about to fail was just as old. Park management, in a breathtakingly criminal act of negligence, had never replaced the original wheel axles, ignoring visible cracks. For 15 years, they even submitted fake safety reports just to keep the profitable ride running. As her train hit the midway point, moving at 46 miles per hour, the 40-centimeter steel axle, worn down from years of use, finally gave away. It snapped clean in half, violently derailing the second car and causing it to tilt at a 45-degree angle. In a horrifyingly precise sequence of events, Yoshino, standing on the left side, had her head caught between the mangled car and a solid metal guardrail running alongside the track. The force of the coaster at that speed slammed her head into the metal barrier, scraping her skull open and tearing away flesh as the train kept grinding forward for several meters. It was over for her in an instant, her body left broken and bloodied, while 18 other passengers were injured in the derailment. The park would eventually declare bankruptcy and close for good, but not before 3 officials were charged with professional negligence, finally admitting to years of falsified reports. They saved money on a part, but ended up paying with the park itself. The Mechanized Mangling. Imagine a design so inherently flawed that an investigator would later call its life-saving measures frighteningly unsophisticated, saying it was simply a matter of time before a catastrophic accident occurred. That ride was the Thunder River Rapids at Australia's Dreamworld, and on October 25, 2016, its time ran out for 4 people. It started with a water pump that had been failing all day, suffering its 3rd electrical fault just after 2 p.m. The water level dropped, causing an empty raft to become stranded on the conveyor. Just 45 seconds later, a second raft carrying 2 families collided with it. When they hit, the conveyor basically grabbed both rafts and yanked them up. The empty raft managed to fall back down without trouble, but the passenger raft got caught. It kept getting pulled until it was standing straight up, pinning the families inside. In seconds, 4 adults, Kate Goodchild, her brother Luke Dorset, his partner Ruzi Aragi, and Cindy Lowe, were pulled into the conveyor machinery, suffering crushing blows. Their bodies were mangled beyond recognition, torn apart with massive internal injuries, including liver fragmentation. The children, aged 10 and 12, managed to escape from the top of the overturned raft, but they were helpless witnesses to their mother's deaths. One worker, on her first day with only 90 minutes of training, had no idea about the emergency stop button that could have ended this in 2 seconds. Utterly unprepared for failure, she kept pressing the wrong buttons as the machinery reduced them to broken remains. An inquest would later reveal 30 years of ignored warnings, near misses, and fake compliance reports, leading to a record $3.6 million fine. But for 4 people and 2 children who saw it all, those failures became an unimaginable reality in under a minute. Man, these rides look fun until you hear stories like this. No joke, 1 slip and it's over. Stay sharp, stay alive, and bro, please don't be another headline. See you soon.